Ladies and gentlemen, we, in the words of the Godfather himself, we are bike. Okay. As we've heard the noise, we've heard some of y'all fucking complaining on YouTube about not creating short form content. So we're back here. Noah's been blowing up on the NBA Top Shot side, even though the NBA Top Shot market's been fucking tanking. So that's been a little bit sad, but he's been blown up there. But we're gonna come back to you guys now. We're gonna bring back the narrative. That's been a popular ask, not just in the Patreon, but people DMing on Twitter. But we're also gonna start doing these segments, which is what this segment will be, and it'll just be like kind of like a versus battle, between Noah and myself. We'll kind of pick players that I like and he dislikes, or vice versa, so that we can kind of just keep each other honest. I think that's one thing that I've missed just doing solo videos is not having Noah call me out as a fraud anymore. So we're kind of good to have that back. So I'm excited to be back on the mic with Noah, with how this channel first started. We fucking built this shit from the ground up, and now we're here. We're still at the bottom. So, it is what it is, but we tried our best. So
Yeah, what
Noah.
better way to rekindle that love than talking shit about Miles Sanders? I wouldn't have it any other way, Mike. I'm glad we're doing this again, and hopefully the audience appreciates and enjoys whatever we have to say about this
Yeah,
fraudulent number 26 in Philly.
exactly. So these will be bi-weekly episodes, not going to be weekly, just because there's no point. We don't want to force like content, but I think bi-weekly gives us enough time to do a little research on our end and drop you guys with a big motherfucking fact. So that's what we're going to do. Before we get started, I don't even know what intro they're going to put in here, but we're going to hit that intro real quick. Let's get to the numbers. You hate Miles Sanders. I don't say I'm a stan, but I think he's undervalued where he is at right now. So I'm going to take the side for the positives. But as we do with all things big dogs, we start with slinging the shit. So you hit us first. What is it about Miles Sanders that just makes you want to give him the Heisman?
Listen, there's probably a shorter list for what I like about the poor kid, but I don't hate the guy. There's just a lot of other players in that vicinity. Even like a Javonte Williams, I'm starting to warm up to him, but even like a David Montgomery, I prefer to him. It's just that I think Philly, whoever runs the front office, must have gotten their heart broken too many times. They have so many commitment issues there. They bring in Kerryon Johnson. I know that doesn't mean much, but when you're out there on the market looking for Kerryon Johnson, you must not have a whole lot of faith in what you got there already. I'm pretty sure Jordan Howard is like still breathing, his heart's still beating, and he's in Philly, which isn't good. They also drafted Kenny Gainwell. Not a lot of draft capital there, but when you look at what Miles Sanders is, like, has he really lived up to the draft capital that he got? Has he been the player that we expected him to be? I honestly feel a lot of the hype that built up around Miles Sanders was one, he's real drippy. He's got his little face mask. He's got long sleeves. He looks cool on the field. And he also backed up Saquon Barkley, and he's pretty athletic. I think a lot of his value still stems from people making the comparison. He backed up Saquon. Then he started after Saquon. He looked real good. And he was good down the stretch during his rookie year. But to me, just seeing him year after year, them showing their hand and their hand being that Miles Sanders isn't necessarily the guy. Now, last year he played a big majority of the snaps when he was healthy, but the goal line carries weren't necessarily there. He had like 7 in 14 games. And also you see guys like Corey Clement be sprinkled in, and Boston Scott, and just the two other aforementioned guys that I brought up that are now on the team and in the fold. I'm just not so sure that with this new coaching staff in town that they have as much commitment to Miles Sanders as we may think. And it makes sense to me in that way because even before these additions were made and when they had Doug Peterson there, the guys that drafted Miles Sanders, they still weren't really fully committed to the guy.
Yeah, so I mean, look, let's discuss that a little bit. One good point you really did bring up though is the coaching staff did change, right? But what I will push back on is the coaching staff. I feel like definitely committed to him. The team stunk, right? Like the team was bad, so he didn't put up the numbers. But if we look at some of the peripherals, right? Miles Sanders 2020 season, opportunity share 76.3%, snap share 77%, which ranked number 6 and number 3 respectively in the NFL. So running back, as we know, is a volume game, right? And if it comes to the volume, Sanders got it. He just didn't get it in the areas that we really wanted him to see. Because if you look at his red zone touches, right, it was 26, and that was ranked number 37 in the NFL. If you look at his targets, it was 52, which ranked number 16 in the NFL. So around that average point. And I think all of us that really went in heavy on Miles Sanders was because of the target volume that he was getting in 2019. Like down that 5-game stretch, he was absolutely a league winner. And when you were giving him the ball and throwing him the ball, it was very, very good, right? So that's what I'm hanging on to. It's like, hey, look, there aren't that many workhorses in the NFL, right? We're in an age where it's mostly committees, and people hear committee and like they're freaking like penis inverts and like they just like run away and like, oh my god, it's committee, it's really really bad. That's not necessarily the case, right? There's a lot of good committees out there, but like at the end of the day, you still want a workhorse, and Miles Sanders is going to be that. I understand, we added Kerryon Johnson, who I don't even know how many knees he has anymore. He probably has like a string quartet
Who's
playing on
born
one
with
of his
one? I
knees.
think he's down to zero now.
He's down to 0 knees. We got Jordan Howard. My expectation, honestly, is that one of these guys, if not two of these guys, will get cut by the time roster cuts has to be made. So the threat, though, which I will give you, is Kenny Gainwell, because Kenny Gainwell is pretty good in the receiving front. That was like what he brought from the table from a college perspective. So that's definitely an aspect that's kind of scary. But in terms of Miles Sanders, a talent, like, I'm with you. Like when he first came out, I was like, dude, if this guy didn't back up Saquon Barkley, no one would care and know his name, because when you looked at him in college, he wasn't that good, right? Like he was very inefficient from a yards per route run perspective per Graham Barfield. He's like much, much lower than Saquon Barkley. He's like 1 point less than 1 or maybe 1.2 or something like that. Saquon's like in the mid to high twos, if I recall correctly. But when he got to the NFL, he improved. So he improved a lot on the receiving front. I thought he was buns, and he showed that he was pretty good. And then if you look at like yards created by, shout out to David Zach 16 on Twitter at David Zach 16, he creates this thing. It's called yards created over expected per attempt. So you know how like Graham Barfield does his yards created, and he does it by film. He watches like literally watch all the film and cuts it up. David does it like using numbers. So he uses like yards blocked from like, from what is it, like Football Outsiders or
Football
something that
Outsiders,
is.
Pro
He
Football
uses like
Focus.
percentage of defensive stacked boxes. He uses yards before and after contact adjusted for line yards to get to what he's calling a yards created over expected. And if you look at 2020, and you look at where Miles Sanders, to be honest with you, I was very surprised to see him here, because it didn't feel like it as a Miles Sanders, someone who had Miles Sanders on his teams, but he was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He was ranked number 8 in the NFL behind Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, Aaron Jones, Dalvin Cook, and Ronald Jones, who was another big surprise to see on that list. So from an efficiency perspective, he was there, right? He was there by all means. The only thing I have for him is I have no doubts that he's going to command the lion's share of the work, the volume in that backfield, given the guys that they've added. The threat to him though is Jalen Hurts, right? Because that's a put in. Jalen Hurts doesn't check down. I mean, if I was watching games last year, a lot of Eagles games, which I hate to admit it, but I was watching a lot of Eagle games, and a lot of the time they were not checking down. Like Miles Sanders had a lot of first downs. He was also bad in his own right. He had a lot of drop passes
I
last
think he
year.
led the league in drops for running
Yeah.
backs. He had 8
Yeah,
of them.
exactly. He might have led the league in like all across the board when I was looking
No,
at
I think
PFF.
Michael Gallup had enough targets to
Oh,
still
yeah,
drop like
that's
15
right.
balls.
That's right. Michael Gallup was there, but he dropped a lot of balls. But we understand that that happens, and I don't really care about drops that much. But if he can correct that part, the other part of it is coaching. So they need to coach Jalen Hurts to be able to dump off and not always look for the deep ball. So everyone knocks on Jalen Hurts about his completion percentage. His completion percentage isn't that bad when you account for the adjusted yards that he's making per attempt. It's a very, very deep throw. So obviously there's going to miss a lot. But that offense wasn't really humming. So you need to take some of those first downs. So my hope and my bet on Miles Sanders is he's going to Miles Sanders will, kind of come back to what we know and what you think he will be on the receiving front. And 2, there will be some coaching that goes into it on Jalen Hurts' end. Now, do I expect Miles Sanders to go out there and get like 80 targets? No, because Jalen Hurts is still Jalen Hurts. But I think there is some upside there for him to provide value. At the end of the day, for me, it just really comes down to the workhorse volume plus the ability to get targets and hopefully correcting on some of the red zone touches. So that's kind of where I'm coming from on the number side. What about you? Like, what do you see when you watch Miles Sanders? Do you look at him and you're like, hey, this guy's a bum?
Not necessarily. I think a lot of his points did come from breakaway runs. And there was a few times last year, I remember against Pittsburgh, Baltimore. I think Baltimore, he had one where it was like a 75-yard breakaway. And then like his MCL just snapped into 1,000 pieces and he fumbled the ball on the 1-yard line. And J.J. Arcega-Whiteside can't even pick up a ball off the ground. So I forgot what happened there. But he definitely creates a lot of yards, as you were saying. He's extremely efficient. I wonder if it's maybe skewed from those big runs. I know he didn't have too many of them, but the ones that he did have were like 70, 80 yards. So if he created like 1 yard off the line of scrimmage, he went for 80, then it's like 79 yards created, whatever. So I don't think that he's a terrible runner. I do think coming into the league, he was a little bit overhyped. What really concerns me about him is what you said with Jalen Hurts. Like the talent is obviously there from Miles Sanders. He's athletic. He can catch the ball. He's fairly elusive. It's just if Jalen Hurts doesn't learn to check down, which we've seen with mobile quarterbacks before, like Lamar
Mm-hmm.
Jackson, what's he in
Mm-hmm.
year 4 now? He's going to year 4 and he still doesn't check down to the running back. And not only that, but we saw it a lot with Kyler Murray last year, why Kenyon Drake was kind of a bust for a big portion of the season
Absolutely.
is last year Jalen Hurts didn't call his number on the goal line at all. He had one goal line carry. We could see a few read options on the goal line where, hey, look, I'm going to hand off to fat ass Jordan Howard or maybe like a little slim, thick Miles Sanders. Now I'm tucking and running. I'm going for 6. So if he calls his own number himself, the touchdown upside might not be there, as well as, those receptions, not only Kenny Gainwell being there, but the quarterback not favoring the running back position. I know Sirianni's coming over from, I believe, like Indianapolis. So maybe Phil Rivers and his like 15 kids taught him a little bit about how to dump off to a running back, but I don't think that's really going to translate. So it just worries me that those high value touches on the goal line might be snaked away by Jalen Hurts, and also on the Jalen Hurts side of things might not check down to him as well. But, a lot of those big plays last year helped buoy his fantasy value. And I'm not going to say that he's going to regress because, as we all know, regression is like a, I don't know, 9-letter word that doesn't really mean anything in fantasy football. So I do think that if he's going to provide value, we need to hope and pray that Jalen Hurts isn't selfish on the goal line. 1,
Mm-hmm.
2, he learns to dump off and not run and call his own number all the time. And then 3, Kenny Gainwell's not out there and he also sustains these long runs. If he can do that, I mean, he has as good a chance as any to finish like top 5 because he is talented and they are getting Brandon Brooks back. That's a tongue twister. It might not even be true. I also think Lane Johnson only played like
Yep.
7 games last year. He's a good offensive lineman. And this is dynasty. And like all these offensive linemen are signed for at least 2 more years. I believe Johnson and Kelsey, or maybe Johnson and Brooks, are
Mm-hmm.
signed through like 2024. And then the third one, whichever between Kelsey, Brooks, and Lane Johnson, there's one of them that's signed for like 2 years. But either way, they got a pretty good line. And if Jalen Hurts is improving, then he's in a good situation. So I don't hate on him to the fact that he's gonna be like my RB27. He's probably like 18 or 19 in my rankings. And if you can get him around there, I'm fine with that because the upside is legitimately like a top 5 guy. I just think the downside that if Jalen Hurts is what he was last year,
Mm-hmm.
could be kind of scary that you're investing a higher pick in a guy who could just be like a between the 20s runner.
Yeah, it's absolutely a little bit on the risky side. But like you said, you have him at RB 1819. His ADP per the ffengineer.com. Shout out to Kevin. He pulls basically real money ADP from Safe Leagues. He's at RB 20, right behind Javonte Williams. So it's interesting.
I love the guy.
Javonte
Love
Williams.
Miles Sanders. This whole video is a fraud. I love the guy at his price.
Okay, yeah. So that's kind of where we're at, right? I mean, but like I like this video because you did bring up a lot of the risks. We share some of the risks for sure, and that those are considerations you have to make. But at an RB 20 price tag in Dynasty, someone that has that top 10 upside, if a couple things go his way, like we said, Philly's getting their O-line back. Maybe Jalen Hurts will be a bit more improved on the offensive side of the ball in his second year, or if Jalen Hurts busts, they're going to bring in old man Joe Flacco, or the year after they're going to bring in someone else. But I think this next 2 years is a good time to capitalize on Miles Sanders at his current price point. So for those of you guys out there, between him and Javonte Williams, I think it's a lot close. I think it's pretty damn close, as the ADP suggests. It depends on what team you're going on, but I think Miles Sanders is going to have a much better year than Javonte Williams. So even if you like Javonte Williams, I think what you can do is probably go with the Miles Sanders and then flip them for Javonte Williams plus next year. Some of the other guys are going ahead of them. Totally understandable. Like Eckler, I love Austin Eckler. I know you love Austin Eckler as well. Antonio Gibson. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I think, is another interesting one. He's going like 4 or 5 spots ahead of Miles Sanders, and same thing with Joe Mixon, going a couple spots ahead of Miles Sanders. I think those guys are a lot closer than what the ADP suggests. So if you're sitting there, in your 4th round, 5th round of your startup drafts, Miles Sanders sit on the clock. I mean, it's a pretty intriguing pick, even with all the risks that we're considering. And Kerryon Johnson, like we said, Joe or Jordan Howard aren't really on top of the risk in terms of threat. It's not a positive that they signed them, obviously, but I wouldn't really let that sway your opinion too much. So that's all we got for you for this little short burst of Miles Sanders hate and love. Turns out we're both frauds and we both slightly love him, slightly hate him, but we just want to show you guys the facts. So that's what we're going to do for these types of episodes, and be short and neat, hit you with the big facts. Noah's going to hit you with the flow in his hair. And depending on what time of the month it is, my hair will either be really good or really shitty, because that's just how it rolls. All right. That's all we got for you guys. Until next time, which will be 2 weeks from now. We'll see you all then. All right. Peace out.
Peace.